guys. So this is heavily inspired by exploring ASMR. So I'm gonna do 2 videos because I have 2 sons. And then in a few months I'll film another because I'm having a 3rd son. I'm pregnant. So I guess my biggest hesitation for filming this was more so like my son, the first story, my son's 5 years old, so it's been like over like 5.5, so it's been a really long time since his birth, and I'm like not a great storyteller to begin with. So hopefully I can kind of stay on track and not get too distracted. But hopefully it'll just help you fall asleep. So there's obviously going to be a lot of TMI, like too much information, like medical type of stuff that might gross you out. So, you know, this might not be relaxing for you if you have no interest in hearing about like birth and stuff like that and pregnancy. And also like, you know, unless you've been through it, there's might be some terms or some just like basic concepts that you don't understand. So I'll try to kind of explain things that I think maybe somebody who hasn't given birth like might not know. If I miss that, if there's something that you're like, what does that mean, or what do you mean by this, feel free to comment and I can answer your question. There's no dumb questions, so feel free to ask anything in the comments. I'm a pretty open book. So I liked that. I might do some like random tapping with it to add to the relaxation. I liked that Lauren kind of started with like the story of how she found out, and then a little bit about her pregnancy, and then told her birth story. So I like that like format. So again, this is heavily inspired by her. So oh my gosh, I'm just hoping I can stay on track, because like I said, I'm not a great storyteller, and then a pregnancy brain on top of that is like alright, so hopefully I can remember everything as well as I can. I'm sure some of it's blurry, some of it might be slightly inaccurate because it's been a while, but I'll try to remember as much as I can. I grabbed this because I wanted to put some on. And I'll probably throw in tongue clicking and hand sounds and cupped whisper. So to start with how I found out, so my first son, I got married young, which I, wanted. I guess obviously you don't get married if you don't want to. So I've been with my husband since I was 17, and so we dated for 5.5 years before getting married. We got married young because we like really wanted to, obviously. But we waited until we took a very traditional route and went to college for, I went to 4-year college. He did like a 5-year professional program. So we got married like a year after we graduated college. So we waited so I was 20. I had just turned 23 when we got married. And so we kind of figured that we would wait about 2 years to get pregnant. We didn't have a very specific timeline, but we knew we weren't ready yet. We're kind of preventative, but we weren't like crazy preventative, because we knew we wanted to start our family young. But we were thinking like 2-3 years after we got married, we would start our family. Or like the soonest would be to have our first baby 2 years after we got married. That was like our general plan. And like the longer we were married, the more I could see us like pushing that timeline further back and just kind of enjoying life without kids. Like I said, we were somewhat preventing pregnancy, but not like very strict. So we definitely took some chances, and we were fully aware of that. so about 9 months into our marriage, I had, like, for the first time ever, like, a slightly irregular cycle. So I got pregnant. Just because I ovulated like a few days earlier than I expected. Again, it was like something that we knew was possible. Like, we weren't being super strict, but it wasn't planned. So I was still 23 at that time that I got pregnant. But I just remember ahead of time being aware of the risk that we took. So I actually did test like 5 days before my missed period, and it was a positive. So I found out like immediately, just because I knew it was a possibility. So after that I took like 4 more tests because I was like a little in disbelief, a little upset about it, to be honest. And we were about to go on a trip to visit his parents, so I didn't say anything for a few days. And when we were there visiting, I wrote him a letter like from the baby and gave it to him. So that's how I told him with that pregnancy. Anyways, overall I feel like the pregnancy was compared to a lot of people I know, it was pretty easy. I did have morning sickness from like my morning sickness didn't start until week 9 and then went until like week 16. But like as long as I was eating, that helped. I only threw up a few times. That's probably the worst I've had morning sickness of all my pregnancies. I had a lot of round ligament pain, and then towards the end I had a lot of bad heartburn and joint pain. I had pretty bad joint pain towards the end, where like I couldn't really like walk in the morning. Like it would take like 20 minutes to be able to walk, because it was just like so painful. Like in my body just like give out. And like hindsight, I think especially towards the end, my baby was posterior, so that means like ideally your baby will come out with their head first and they'll face your stomach, but he was turned around, he was still head down, but he's like back, like he was facing my back, right? No, I forget, whatever it is, or maybe his spine was against mine, whatever it is, it's like he was kind of turned around a little bit, like rotated, but that causes a lot of joint pain. Hindsight, I'm almost positive that's what happened, and he was like that my whole labor, which is very unfortunate because that started to happen with my second birth. But they knew that. They were like, oh, he's posterior, do these exercises and it'll relieve that pain and flip him around. That's what I did. It worked. It's such a shame that it was that simple and nobody cared to even think about it or tell me or ask me. I don't know, it's very frustrating that like their job is about pregnancy and birth and they didn't even realize my baby was posterior. But now that I've been through it, like I know he for sure was, like he had to have been. So we'll get into that a little bit more. So I think that's why I had some bad joint pain. So then let's start the labor story, I guess. So let's see. Obviously you don't know what to expect with your first. Like if they'll come early or late or whatever. So when I was 39 weeks and 2 days, 39 and 3 days, whenever my labor started, I guess. So when he was due in January, and so that's around like playoffs, a Super Bowl for football. Sounds dumb, but I remember when we took the hospital tour, watch? Well, the morning of one of a playoff game, so this was a Sunday, we did end up watching the game. We had family over. We had my brother-in-law and his wife, who was pregnant and only like a few weeks apart from me, come over to visit, and like watch the game with us just for fun. So that morning around like 10 a.m. is when my contractions started. So I had Braxton Hicks for weeks or months leading up to that, but they did never hurt. It was like I could feel the contraction, which honestly I've been having like not this entire time, like since my second trimester. I could feel that I was having a contraction, but it didn't hurt or anything like that. So I started to feel like back pain every time I'd have a contraction. I'm like, okay, this is like, I think a contraction or a Braxton Hicks. And I just remember we went to the grocery store that morning, me and my husband, and I was like really slow. Like, I'm a fast walker, but I was walking so slow, and every time I'd have one, it would be painful in my back, and so I would like slow down. I'd be like, oh, that hurts. Like, I kind of have to like move. Like, it was really uncomfortable, and it started to hurt a little bit, and so I was like, I would like kind of stop. Like, I could move through them. It wasn't that big of a deal, but, and I was like, interesting, like maybe this is labor, I don't know. So I started to track my contractions. I didn't have like a contraction app. I just would like write them in my notes in my phone. But I wasn't timing them. I would just like write the time I think that I would have them. And so they started pretty far apart. I think they were like 20 minutes apart or something like that. And then we went to the park. I did some walking at the park. Came home. We did some cooking. We watched the game, which was probably like 7 p.m. or something. So by then, my contractions were basically every 5 minutes, and they would last like a minute. Like, it was like the very stereotypical like you're in labor, but they weren't like excruciating. Like, I could talk through them, but I remember we were watching the game and I wasn't really watching because like I was just tracking my contractions, and every time like I had one, I would like, I mean, they were painful because it was all in my back. I like barely felt anything in my stomach. It was all back labor, which is a result of a posterior facing baby. And I like didn't know how to that's one regret I have for that pregnancy, is I did zero like labor research. You do all this research for like what do you need postpartum, what, like how to breastfeed, or like that's like what I focused on, like what, like how to take care of a newborn, or even just pregnancy, but like I kind of really skipped the whole labor part. So I regret that because like I did not know how to manage the pain at all. Especially it being back labor. Like, now that I've experienced both, back labor was significantly worse than regular labor. So, then we were watching the game, and then our guests left, and then I kind of knew, I was like, okay, he's definitely going to be born really soon. So we started like cleaning the house. I like repacked my baby bag, which is so funny because like I packed it really early. I had my baby bag packed and ready to go at 28 weeks because I was so paranoid I'd have to go into like preterm labor. And then when I was in labor, I just like repacked the entire bag anyways. So I like repacked my bag. I remember we were like hanging decorations that we got as gifts from people because we were like, oh, well, they'll be visiting, so they'll see their. It was like so silly, like all the things that we were choosing to do while I was in labor, like getting our house ready, knowing like my mom was gonna come stay with us for a few days once the baby was born, and then people would be coming to visit us, and so we were just kind of like cleaning up and like making sure the house was ready. Or apartment, like we lived in an apartment. So then, like I said, pretty much like about halfway through the day, I think at like that they like use as a rule of thumb. But I didn't call because like they just stayed that way. Like they never got closer. They just like kind of stayed like that. So finally, in that evening, I probably around like 9 or 10 called the doctor and was like, hey, I have these contractions. They're not getting like, they're painful and I have to breathe through them, but I can still talk through them. And they're not getting closer together, but they're already pretty close. But they're not getting like the pain is not getting significantly worse. But like they do hurt a lot. And she just kind of talked to me about, she's like say, like, would you get because she knew I wanted to get the epidural. She's like, would you get the epidural right now? And I was like, no, I probably wouldn't. It's not that bad. And she's like, okay. And you can talk through them. So, you know, this very easily could be the beginning of labor. It could be Braxton Hicks. It could be false labor. So what you should do, you should like take a bath, try to sleep, see if they go away, drink a lot of water, yada yada. So I drew up a bath. I tried taking a bath. I couldn't sit in the bath. It was so uncomfortable. I was like, forget this. I tried to go to sleep. Could not sleep at all. Like I couldn't sleep through them. So I was like, well, they hurt a lot, honestly. So then I took a walk around our complex. This was like 11 p.m. and I'm like walking around the complex. Every, few minutes I would like hurl over and just like shake through the pain, like, oh, that hurts. Like I had no idea how to relieve the pain. And it's just such a bummer that like now I know what to do, but I didn't then. I was just like, ugh, it hurts so bad. Anyways, so finally around midnight I called back and I was like, I do think this is labor. Like it's getting to the point where like I can't do anything. Like I can't relax. I can't sleep. I can't, like, nothing is helping. So I'd like to at least get checked and make sure I'm dilating, and then like I'd rather be in the hospital with an epidural than just like lying in my home not knowing how to manage the pain. Which is just so funny because it's just such a different experience from my second birth. So they were like, yeah, that's like, you can always come down and get checked because like worst case we'll send you home, best case you'll have a baby. And so my husband was frustrated because like we knew the risk of like it could be we could get sent home tonight and then we'll get home at like 2 a.m. and it was a work night. And he woke up at like 5 a.m. for work, so he's just like, I hope this baby is born because I have to go to work tomorrow. So we went to the hospital and I remember like checking in at like 12:45 a.m. And I remember thinking like, oh, this is the night after a playoff game. Like I bet it's gonna be super busy, and it wasn't. Honestly, the entire time I felt like we were the only people in the hospital because like anytime I rang the nurse button, like they were immediately in there, like super attentive, like very available. Like it was a really great experience for being a hospital birth. So they take us to what they call a triage room. So that means like they don't just automatically check you in to have a baby. They have to like make sure you're in labor before they take up a bed. So they take you into a little room where they check you first. So they checked me and I was at 0.5 centimeter. I couldn't believe it. I was like, I've been having almost consistent and painful contractions for 14 hours. Or at this point it was like 1 or 2 a.m. I was like, for 15 hours, you're saying 15 hours of painful contractions have gotten me 0.5 centimeter. I was so upset. I remember laying there thinking, and I was like, because all day, I mean, every one of them hurt. And so I was laying there getting checked, and I'm like, oh, I'm like convinced they're gonna say 3-4 centimeters. I was prepared for them to say like 6. Let's get you going. Like you're about to have a baby. Like, because the back labor hurts so bad. So I'm waiting, and they check me, and they say 0.5 centimeter, and I go, fuck. I just laid my head back. I'm like, fuck. Are you kidding me? Like this is so much work. Hindsight, now I've done a lot more research about birth since having my first, which I wish I would have done before my first, but it's very common to like labor for like 3 days with your first, which is horribly draining. But I had no idea. I was like, oh, if I'm contracting for 15 hours, I should be having a baby, right? No, half a centimeter. So they're like, again, it's very frustrating because I feel like if they knew about labor and they knew I was having back labor, I think they should have said like, okay, go into the waiting room, do some downward dogs to turn the baby around, do some cat-cow poses, get on all fours, like fix the pain points. But they didn't. They were just like, okay, well, we can't check you in at a half centimeter. That's not really labor. Like it could be the beginning of labor, but like we don't know how long it's gonna take. So they said walk around the hospital for an hour, come back in 1 hour, and we will check you again. And if you are progressing, we will let you check in. If there's no progress, that means this is false labor and you have to go home. Which I was terrified of, because I was like, what do you mean fault? Like, how am I supposed to go to work when I like have to like stop every 5 minutes because it hurts so bad? So we walked around the hospital for an hour, and every time I had a contraction at this point, and it's crazy to me because I was only half a centimeter, but at this point I could not talk through the contractions. I would like stop and I couldn't talk, and I would lean over and like they hurt that bad. It's because it was back labor. Now I know. Like if it had been regular labor, I don't know, like it would have been maybe more manageable. So I walked around the hospital for an hour. So at that point, I think it was like 2:30 a.m. So I called my mom and I was like, hey, heads up, we are not checked in yet. However, like I can't talk through my contractions. So I'm pretty sure this is labor. But I'll text you updates, but I wanted you to be aware that like we're at the hospital now and we're probably gonna stay, but we have to wait and see. So at 3 a.m. they check me again and they go, okay, now you're at 1 centimeter. I again laid my head back and went, fuck, are you kidding me? Because it like hurt so bad. And they were like, okay, so we do think you're in labor. However, this is just super slow. It could be another 2 days before you have the baby. So you can either go labor at home or we will check you in, but you have to agree to let us progress your labor to speed it up. They don't want me like using up a bed. I didn't care. I was like, yes, get me in the room, get me the epidural, please. So they checked me in and they said, do you want the epidural right away? And I said yes. And I had heard from other people that it takes hours for them to, like, you can say like, oh, I want an epidural, and it'll take them hours to come to your room. So I said yes, send them, thinking like, oh, it might be a few more hours till I get it. So I want to make sure like they know I want it. They were in the room before I was in the room. I'm telling you, it felt like no one else was giving labor that night. So we check in, we get to the room. So this is again around like 3 a.m., maybe a little later, like maybe closer to 4. We're in the room and they're like ready to give me the epidural. So I was like, great, thank you so much. So the epidural process, I'm not really explaining stuff in detail, but epidural is a shot they put into your spine, and it mostly numbs. It's like a local anesthetic, I think. It mostly numbs everything, like the bottom half of your spine, or like in your legs, not. So I agreed to get it because I was in so much pain, and I was like 90% sure I was gonna get an epidural from the get-go, and like 10% of me was like, well, if I can handle it, I'll have like go without it. But like I figured I'd get it. So that part is kind of intimidating or scary because it was more of like a mental scare, like because they make you sign all this paperwork, like, and they're like, you can't move, you can't, like, they're very serious about it, and like your husband has to go to this side of the room and you can't do this and you can't do that. Like it kind of freaked me out. But when they gave me the epidural, like I didn't feel it, or I barely felt it. Like I think it hurt like slightly, but like people say, like some people have said the epidural hurts a lot, but I'm contractions were so bad that it was nothing compared to the contraction. So I got the epidural, and I did immediately feel relief. I felt the pain, like the pain went away, and then I got like an adrenaline rush, like energy, and it felt really good. Oh my gosh, like that was like one of the best feelings in the world, was like having contractions and then getting the epidural, because it not only removes your pain, it like gives you an adrenaline rush. Well, I don't know what happened, but I basically had a mostly failed epidural. So like it worked, and then it stopped working. Like it was like I got the rush when they put it in, and then I started to feel the contractions again, and then they got like more and more painful, and again it was all in my back. So my theory is maybe that the clicker, because you're supposed to click it every like half hour or something to like put more medicine in your body, and I think the clicker didn't work, because then later we were like, hey, I'm like not feeling any relief, this is excruciating, could we up the dosage or something? And they're like, yeah, we will. So they upped when they like changed the dosage, then I felt pain relief, and then I didn't feel any more pain relief after that again. And I've had a birth without an epidural, and I know for a fact it was not working for the majority of my labor, because the birth of my second son was significantly easier and way less painful than the birth of my, I don't want to say way less, but it was less painful than the birth of my first son with the epidural. So I wish people had told me like your epidural can fail, because I did not plan at all to manage the pain, and like I just assumed if I got the epidural that it would be like a mostly pain-free birth, and then it failed. So I'm still confused. I don't know, like I'm assuming it's just the clicker stopped working, like it didn't work. I don't know. I to this day don't understand. But I do know it was the worst pain I've ever been in my entire life. And laboring on your back without pain management, I think is the most excruciating thing. Like if you're gonna have an unmedicated birth, you're not gonna be laying down. Like that's not how you relieve your pain. You're gonna be walking, you're gonna be moving, you're gonna be doing stuff. Well, when you get an epidural, you have to stay in the bed on one of your sides. You're not allowed to lay on your back. You're not allowed to get up. You're not allowed to like sit up. Like you have to be laying on your side. And for me, and I do know this with my second birth as well, if I was laying down on my side, like I could not handle it was like the pain was way worse that way. And especially the back pain. Oh, way worse. So let's see. So I got the epidural at like 3 or 4. Anyways, so then around 6 a.m. I had only gotten to like a 3, maybe like a 3 centimeters out of the 10 you're supposed to get to. But the first 5 are like way slower than the last 5. Like once you get to 5 or 6, like it goes way faster. So they then broke my water to try and like expedite it. So they broke my water around 6:30 a.m. So that's when we called my mom and we said, okay, they're gonna break my water, so you can, if you want to head over, then you can, because it'll probably be within a few hours. So this was now like 6 a.m. the next day. And breaking your water usually helps make it pretty fast, I think. So they broke my water at like 6 a.m. I think, yeah. And then I labored for another like 6 hours. And epidurals slow down your labor, like for sure. But at the same time, it was my first birth, so it probably just would have been slow anyways. But epidurals can stop or slow down your labor. So then I had like 30 more or 6 more hours of labor. So that was on honestly really, 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 really difficult. I was basically just on my side, like shrieking in pain, honestly. I couldn't open my eyes, I couldn't, and especially like the transition part of labor is where your contractions are back to back to the point where you have almost no break in between, and they were so exhausting to go through. Yeah. I'm just being completely honest. Honestly, I wish I had heard more like really honest birth stories. I feel like everyone was so scared to like freak you out as a expecting mom, but like I wish, like I was so surprised, like I couldn't believe how painful it was with the epidural, and I was like, why didn't anyone tell me this was a possibility? And I thought the epidural was working because it had, and so I was like, why didn't anyone tell me that it was like a near-death experience even with the epidural? And then, you know, the more I talked about it after I gave birth, people were like, that's not at all my experience. Like, I had no pain. Like, it shouldn't have hurt. Like, it didn't, it must have failed. So now I know, but like, I'm like, am I just like a wimp? Like, why is this so painful? But yeah, that honestly was the worst experience of my life, I think, was just like laboring in bed with the failed epidural. Like, I was just, this sounds so dramatic, but I literally, this is how I felt. Like, I truly thought I was going to die. I was like, this is so painful that I think I'm going to die. I'm like, I might pass out from the pain. And I was like, God, honestly, I don't even care right now. Like, kill, like, I won't take me. Like, it was so bad. And it sounds dramatic, but like, that's really what I felt in the moment. And I do want to tell you, like, I did not feel that way with my second at all, and I did not get an epidural. Like, totally different experience. So it really was only because my epidural failed. So then they had me start pushing around 12 p.m. the next day. So like I checked, we got there at like 12:30 a.m. and so then 12 hours later I had started pushing. And this was like 24 or 26 hours after I had started contractions. So I started pushing, and that was really difficult. I could not figure out how to push. And it was very exhausting. Again, it's wild how night and day my two birth experiences were. My second one, I'll do a whole video on it, but it was just like so much more like natural and intuitive, and like I knew what I was doing. And not even because I knew what I was doing, I just felt like the direction I was given was so much better. So in the room was my husband, my mother. They had a resident actually deliver the baby, and then behind her was the OB just coaching her. And then they also had like 4 med students watching. Then they also had like 2 or 3 nurses, like 2 nurses for me. Then we also had the pediatrician in the room, and like he had a nurse or 2 for the baby, because while the baby was still in my womb, he pooped, which they're not supposed to do, and that's usually fine, but they need to make sure that they don't get an infection from like swimming in their own poop. So the second they're born, the pediatrician needs to be there to like check the baby and make sure he's fine. So my husband said he counted, and there were 12 people in the room. However many people that is. So like everybody in the room. So when you push, basically the position they had me in, they had like the stirrups up. So like you're laying on the edge of a bed, and they had these 2 poles, and I put my feet on the poles, and they were like, okay, you're going to use your feet to push the poles. Your husband and mom are gonna have their every time I pushed, every single muscle in my body was being used, and just like trying to focus on pushing the baby out, I guess. I really didn't know what I was doing. And the OB would like just yell at me, like I that was her method of it, and motivation was just like push, and I was like scared of her. I was like, okay, it worked. Like I do respond well to people yelling at me. Like I did like push, but she's just like, you're pushing wrong. But then she wouldn't tell me, like, she's like, don't push like that, push harder, or push slower, or push, like, I don't know, like she would just like yell out instructions, and I was like, I don't know what I'm doing, like this is so hard. So I pushed for 45 minutes, and I really felt like I didn't even know how I was pushing, or part of it might have been because I had the epidural, so like it was working in parts of my body, but not. I'm still so confused about the epidural. So I don't know, I like didn't really know how to push, or it was hard to feel when I was pushing, even though it was weird. It was like I could feel the pain, but I couldn't control what my body was doing. It was such a like mind fuck. Like I just did not know what I was doing the whole time. But so I pushed for 45 minutes. I got to the point where I was like, they're gonna have to take, like I can't push. They're gonna have to take me for a C-section. I was so worried. Like I was like, I just don't think I can do this. Like it's too hard. Like I'm not doing it right. He's not coming out. Eventually he did come out. They were just like push, and like everyone in the room is like screaming. There's like 12 people in the room like screaming like push. I was like, oh my god. It was like a very intense moment. Eventually I did push the baby out. The baby did come out. And like I can't help but wonder, like if he was posterior, would that have changed the pushing? Would it have made it harder? Would it have made it slower? I don't know. I just don't know. So he came out. So I pushed him out. Excuse me. I pushed him out, and they immediately, like I didn't hear him cry at first, and they immediately like cut the umbilical cord and put him and gave him to the pediatrician. Like they were like, hurry, like super panicked because they had to check him for the infection, but they like were like very panicky about it. So they're like, hurry, and I was like, oh my god. And so like immediately my brain went to like, he's not breathing, he's not alive, like oh my gosh, like he's not okay. But they were just hurrying because of the infection risk. And then I heard him cry, like they cleared out his nose and all that jazz, and I heard him cry, and I cried a little bit because I was like, oh my god, he's alive. Like I like convinced myself he wasn't alive. But they checked him out and all that, and then they put him on my chest. So so they put him on my chest so he was fine, he didn't have an infection. They cleared his blood, all that, and then they put him on my chest while they stitched me up. So again, there's so much I learned after having a baby. I took a birthing class with my second baby. You'd think I would have done this with my first. I did not. I took like a full, like 12-hour birthing class with my second pregnancy. And they were explaining that whenever you're about to crown, or whenever the head is crowning, you change the way you push. So you push really hard just to get the baby to the bottom, and then once the baby starts crowning, which means their head starts to come out, and that's like the most effort, is like to get the head out. Then you start to push slow, like you do light, like you're supposed to push. Whatever they described it was the opposite of what the OB told me to do with my first son. And they were like, because you're just gonna tear to shreds if you do it that way, which I was told to do with my first son. So they stitched me up. I had second degree tears. So there's first degree tears, which are the least like bad, like they're like, that's just like a surface tear, and then there's second, third, and fourth is like horrible, 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 worst thing you could go through. So I had 2 second degree tears at either side, if you really wanted to know. This is where like it gets super TMI. One of the tears was like really close, or like whatever it was like in the way of like if I were to try to urinate, if I were to try to pee, that scar would get hit by the pee, which urine is like acidic and hot and burns, which adds to my like postpartum story. Anyway, so I had 2 second degree tears that they sewed up, and then I just remember like getting the shakes, like just like shaking uncontrollably, and I got extremely cold right after the birth. So I sat in the room, in the delivery room, like in the dark by myself. It was really weird. It was like they like sent everyone out, and I even think like they like sent my husband and my mom and my dad to like the room we were gonna stay in for the next day or two, and like left me by myself in the room, and like all the lights were off. It was really weird. I just remember feeling really weird. Like I was completely covered in blankets because I was so cold, and I think I was holding the baby, and I was like shaking uncontrollably, which I thought was because of the epidural, but it wasn't. Or it could have been. Like it could be like post epidural, because at that point I think they took the epidural out. Or it could be some people who don't get the epidural say that their body just like reacts to childbirth by shaking. But I don't think I did that with my second, so it must have been the epidural. I remember being that's the most physically exhausted I've ever been, because like my body, I mean my arms from pushing, my arms were sore for days after that, like because they were like, you use every single part of your body to push, which was interesting because that's not what I did with my second. But so my arms like hurt for days, and my body felt so like I felt like I just run a marathon. Like I was like so exhausted, and I mean, mind you, like I didn't sleep, so I had been up for whatever 30 hours and went through labor and had a baby, like all without that sleep. Like I didn't sleep the whole night before. So that was very draining and exhausting. So then they took me to the hotel room, then they took me to like the room where you stay, and I don't know if I'll go into all of that. I think I might not. But my recovery took about 13 weeks, because of the 2 tears. In the first week, I couldn't pee. Like, that sounds ridiculous. Like, it was a really bad recovery for me personally, which is like mind-blowing because, like I said, like second degree tear is not as bad as like third or fourth, and like it took 13 weeks for me to recover. Yeah, it just, there's so much that I didn't know that I think could have been prevented, but I just like didn't think to research or anything. Even just like postpartum, like you bleed after you give birth, and I bled I bled for like a month, and then I stopped bleeding, and then I started bleeding again, and I didn't think anything of it. Whereas with my second birth, they told me ahead of time, like, hey, if you stop bleeding, that's a good sign, and if you were to start bleeding again, that means you are doing too much physically and you are hurting yourself. So if you stop and then start again, that is a sign that you need to go back to bed rest and you should not be moving. And no one told me that with my first. So like I went back to work at 6 weeks, I still was wearing pads, like I was still bleeding at work. And like it didn't have to be that way. I had known that I wasn't supposed to start bleeding again, like, so then I bled from like 5 to 7 weeks after. But if I had known that, then like I would have slowed down and not done as much as I was doing. But like I didn't know that. I was just like, oh, I guess I'm just bleeding again, whatever. But yeah, it took about 13 weeks for my stitches to heal. And for them to like sign off. Like usually they sign off at 6 weeks. Like you go back at 6 weeks and they're like, okay, you look good, bye. Well, at 6 weeks they're like, okay, come back at 10. And then at 10 weeks they're like, okay, come back at 12. Because I wasn't healed yet, but I guess that's all I'll talk about with postpartum. But yeah, so that is my birth story. So I'm sorry it was not very motivating or inspiring. I do think my second birth story is. So whenever I film that and post that, I will link that birth story as well. It won't be linked to the first, like, for a while, because it doesn't exist yet. But if you're watching this, if this video is older and you're watching it, it'll be linked. But my second birth was like completely different. So that will be an interesting story to tell as well. And hopefully my third birth story is also very good. But yeah, hopefully this just made you fall asleep because I rambled forever and hopefully it wasn't too all over the place. I don't think I missed any big things about labor. One thing that I think is interesting is, I think this from the epidural, like, my leg, my thigh, if I poked it, it was like tingly, kind of numb to the touch for like 4 months after I gave birth, which like really freaked me out. I was like, ugh. So I've chosen I'm not going to be getting, I did not get an epidural for my last, and I won't be getting one again. It just like, since it didn't work for me, I'm like, okay, well, I guess I don't know, I could try again. I mean, so many people I know have had great successful stories with epidural, but like, mine's just not one of them. And hindsight, I'm glad that happened because it made me have the courage to have a birth without the epidural. And that was such a different, it was like a beautiful experience, to be honest. Like, I like looked forward to giving birth. Like I kind of look forward to giving birth again because it was such a good experience last time. So I never would have had that. Like if I, I'm glad that I got to have both experiences. And I never would have tried to give birth the way I did last time if it hadn't been like a bad experience the first time. I don't know. So I guess that's the positive. And like here we are. Like I had more kids. Like it didn't scar me